So I've been asked what are some of the strategies that I use to live with mental illness. And what I've decided to do is condense them into five broad categories. We're going to go through those categories today. Today's going to be more, I guess, educational. I'll stop moving the microphone so that we can get rid of that noise. But it's what I do every day, what I have to do in order to live with mental illness. Let's go.
Welcome to Shattered the Podcast.
Sharing the lived experience of mental illness on
A father,
a mother.
A family.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go.
G'day, and welcome back to Shattered the Podcast. I am Mark. Today I'm talking about my 5 strategies for living with mental illness. Firstly, I want to start with why I'm doing this subject. It's actually come out a little bit recently, and a few people have asked, but my wife recommended that I do this as well. So, as you know, I listen to Mary very closely, and pretty much when she makes a suggestion, I follow through with it because it's always a good suggestion. All right, so now the strategies that I'm going to give them to you in no particular order. Okay, and it's strategies for getting by just day to day. They're not strategies for a complete life or something like that. They shouldn't be used as a guidance or a template for yourself, because every person living with mental illness has their own strategies for dealing with things. And I want to, before I start, talk about things that could be considered strategies, but are not going to be included in this today. The first is, of course, psych counseling, receiving treatment by talking to somebody receiving the various treatments, be it electrodes, magnets, medication, talking, whatever it's going to be. So that's one thing that has to happen. For me, I'm also not going to talk about medication today. While that is a strategy, it's something that is somewhat out of my control, apart from remembering to take my pills. So I don't really see it as being a strategy. So what the strategies that I'm going to talk about today, they're an overall kind of concept that I have to use in order to be able to function day to day. Okay, so there's 5 of them. The first one that we're going to talk about is acceptance. I had and have a lot of trouble with the idea that my mind is broken. I was, and still am, I guess people would say, quite an intelligent person. I read a lot. I'm not an intellectual. I'm not an academic, but I can hold my own in academic discussions. I have a broad base of knowledge. And I am also trained as a behavior specialist working with people with brain trauma and disability. So to come to the conclusion that I was now broken, I was a person that needed help, was something that I fought against, and it created a lot of anger in me. Anger at the situation, anger at the circumstance, anger at my lack of ability to deal with things. I was honestly just angry. You could and we did try and divide out all the little ways that made me angry, what makes me angry about that. But overall, it was just this railing against the fact that I had a mental illness, that I was broken, that I needed assistance, that I needed help. We all need help in our day to day, but being a male, somewhat of an alpha, being independent, being in control of my life, understanding that now I needed help, that I was weaker than I was before. And that came in the form of acceptance. I had to accept that, not that I was broken, not that I was useless, but I had to accept that something in my mind, the chemistry in my head, had changed. I had an injury. I'm not stuck with a disorder. I don't have an illness. I was injured. And having PTSD is an injury. Now, if you're listening and going, well, I have bipolar, how is that an injury? I would see it as the same as epilepsy. It is something that you live with, it is something that you deal with, but it is out of control. Your mind, your brain chemicals don't function the way that they ideally should. You are not broken. You are not useless. You are living with a condition. So for me, my first strategy was acceptance. Okay, my second strategy, you're going to hear and you're going to kind of laugh a little bit because it's easy to mock. It's avoidance. Sounds strange. How can avoidance be a strategy? Well, when you don't want to accept the fact that you have limitations because of a mental illness, you go gung ho into everything. And that's what I did. After I was injured, I tried to go straight back to work. I couldn't. I tried a different career and I tried really, really hard to succeed in that career. And to all intents and purposes, I was succeeding. I was becoming a semi senior public servant. It was bringing in good money. Uh, but I was running on borrowed time. I was forcing a square peg into a very tiny round hole. And I had to learn that there were things that I just cannot do. I had to learn to avoid things. Now, not avoid out of fear and avoid out of a place of insecurity or self doubt, but avoid in the way of safety. Somewhat like teaching your children not to stick a something metal into a PowerPoint. We don't teach them that because they are dumb or there's something wrong with them. We teach them to avoid that because it's common sense. So, with my mental health, along with acceptance, I had to learn avoidance. Crowds, not good for me. Being out and about for longer than an hour or two, being at the shops for an hour or two is too long. It's too much. There's just too much input for me. Going to certain functions, hanging out with certain people, doing things at certain times. I had to learn to avoid. I had to learn that it's okay to say no to things. And that includes things that I want to do, if that makes any sense to you. I love playing squash. I love it. It's a great game. But I can't join a social competition. I cannot deal with just the banter that goes on around outside of a squash court, just people chatting. I can't do it. It well, I mean, I physically can, but I come home drained and exhausted and spent. I can't just go and exercise in a group situation like that with a bunch of people because it's too much for me. I avoid a lot of family functions. It might seem strange, but my wife and I have learnt that the longer that I spend at some family functions, the worse my mental health gets. So I go, I participate for as much as I can, and then I bow out. And I bow out quietly. Turn to my wife, say, I think I'm done. Often she'll turn to me and say, hey, have you had enough? It's like, yeah, I kind of have. Is it because I don't like the people that are there? Is it because I'm afraid of the people there? No, it's just the mental marathon that I've been running to stay functioning in that situation, to be constantly being mindful, to be constantly uh, allowing myself to not respond to things, to check out emotionally and mentally and just do breathing exercises for a couple of minutes because I'm starting to get anxious. I'm starting to get fearful. And again, it's not because these people are horrible people or anything. It's just because they're people. It could be them. It could be my family, my immediate family. I mean, with my kids, there's times where my wife and I deliberately separate me from them because our interactions are getting unhelpful. And the better option is just to go to our corners. My wife's a great arbiter of that. Okay, so my first strategy is acceptance, accepting that I have limitations. Second is avoidance, avoiding situations that I can. The third is another weird one. It's distraction. When you hear distraction, most of us think of our kids on a device. Their distraction is almost a negative thing. You want people to be focused and involved. If somebody's distracted, that's a bad thing. A friend of mine taught me something recently, something that she verbalized, something that I already do, and that is to learn patience, to understand when I'm going through a mental health situation, it will pass if I give it time. If I fight it, if I confront it sometimes, so, okay, let's talk about I'm at a family function and I force myself to stay in a conversation. I force myself because I believe that I need to be normal. Well, that forcing myself is like trying to supercharge a marathon runner in the middle of a marathon and asking them to do a 100-meter sprint. Say, just go 100 meters absolutely as fast as you can. Well, it's going to be impossible. You can't do that in the middle of a marathon. You've got to husband your energy. You've got to keep reserves in the tank. So distraction for me is doing that. It's allowing myself to not be consumed with my thoughts and my feelings, and it's allowing myself to switch off. I play video games, and I generally play fairly complicated games because they take a lot of thinking. I need to focus completely on the game, and often watching a game, watching a TV show, the only benefit that I'm getting out of it is that I'm not thinking about my mental illness, which is just an amazing feeling. That you're able to switch off the thoughts in your head. I've said before, I don't drink alcohol because I hate the taste. It full on tastes like petrol to me. And yes, I know you're going to say vodka has no taste. It does. For somebody that doesn't drink alcohol, vodka is like the smell of petrol. In high school, my friends thought it would be funny to try and get me drunk. I was a bit wild and crazy anyway. I don't know what they assumed was going to happen. But at every party I'd go to, there would always be a drink handed to me at some stage, and I would get it to my mouth, smell it, and know that there was alcohol in it. Even if it was just a pinch of vodka, I would know. That has been a blessing and at times a curse because at times I've wanted to just stop thinking about things. And I can so understand somebody that uses alcohol to just turn off those feelings, just turn off that thought process, let them think about something else, let them think about nothing. I can completely understand that. It's that is what I'm trying to achieve through distraction, not being consumed with my hurt, my pain, my sorrow. All right. So, first three strategies: acceptance, avoidance, distraction. The third one is mindfulness. Now, when you mention mindfulness, people often think of sitting cross-legged and chasing butterflies, saying until the cows come home. For me, mindfulness is just grounding myself in the concept that I am safe. So one of my bad triggers is people with intellectual disability. I was hurt in that field many, many times, and the final incident which led to my diagnosis with complex PTSD was with a disabled person. So when I was uh, first hurt, I was in a supermarket, and to this day, I am banned from going back to this supermarket because I was walking down an aisle, and up ahead of me was a group house. You can tell a group house from a mile away if you've worked in that field. There's two highly functioning people, one of them probably pushing a wheelchair, the other's corralling a couple of people that need advice, direction, and assistance. Very, very easy to tell. This sent my fight or flight into overdrive. I basically went to a very, very panicked, distraught, fearful place. I turned around and there was a second group of people with disability. A couple of people in wheelchairs, a couple of people with Down syndrome, two staff members. It's always two. It's never any more than that. Often it's one. Very, very overworked and underpaid people. But I wasn't thinking about that in that moment. I'd turned around to escape, and my escape route was blocked. You're in the aisle of a supermarket. One end is blocked. You turn around, the other is blocked. Where do you go? You go over the stacks. And that's what I did. I don't really remember doing that. Likewise, I don't remember a time real well when I was in an office, at my office, and I was supposed to be returning to work, and a person with disability was let in, and he was quite vocal. Not dangerous, but just vocal. Uh, a guy caught me trying to leap out of a fourth floor window because that was the only way that I could get away from this guy. So, needless to say, after climbing over one of the stacks, one of the central shelves in the supermarket, destroying whatever product was on there, I'm banned from that store for life. Thankfully, well, I don't even remember leaving. I must have, I don't know if I was carrying the few things that I was shopping with. All I know is that I was out of my mind in fear. And one of the things that makes my fear worse is that often the people that I think about in my triggers, because they're disabled, they're often women. Now, there's one thing in my psyche, one thing in my being that even in my worst situations, and I know this for a fact, I would never hurt a person that was intellectually disabled, smaller than me, or more particularly a female. So when the male shop person tried to stop me, I had no problem throwing him out of the way. He was just somebody that was in the way of that fear. It was another thing that was trying to stop me getting away. Now, mindfulness plays into this because whenever I go anywhere, I need to remind myself that I'm safe. Now, if you're looking at this on the video, and you can on YouTube, you would know that I am not a small person. I am not, uh, I don't know, how would I describe myself? I look like a biker. I often get confused for a biker with no tattoos. That's what I get a lot of. Big lad, I got resting grumpy face, um, and I'm strong. And I have, in my day, been in a lot of fights. So it's incredible to me that seeing a small child with cerebral palsy in a wheelchair will freak me out because there's nothing that that kid can do to me. That's part of my mindfulness. If I see a person with a disability, I have to remind myself that I'm safe. When I have a critical incident, when I call my wife and she can tell that I'm freaking out because I'm breathing fast, I'm stuttering, I'm upset. The first and only thing she says to me is breathe. Just breathe. Are you remembering to breathe? And what does the breathing do? It gives me mindfulness. Now, there's situations where things well up. I was at a school assisting somebody doing a talk the other day about mental illness. And for some reason, something in that room was triggering me. I wasn't able to pin down what it was, but it was getting really bad. And I was starting to feel that trap sensation. And it must have looked weird because I just leaned down behind the desk, shut my eyes, clenched my fists, said, "You're safe. There is no problem here." I just breathed and breathed until calm returned. Then I was able to continue functioning. Thankfully, I wasn't expected to talk in that situation. I don't think that I could have. But that's what mindfulness is to me. It's before I go into a place, it's understanding what I'm walking into. This is a shopping center car park. If it's full of cars, I have to get myself mentally prepared for the fact that there's going to be a lot of people there and that none of them want to hurt me. It's crazy that, see, even now, I say these things and I have to go back to my first strategy, which is acceptance. It's okay that this is now a limitation for me because I get mad at the world, at God, at whoever, because of the fact that this happened to me. All right. So our fourth strategy that I put into place is mindfulness. So we've got 1, acceptance, 2, avoidance, 3, distraction, 4 is mindfulness. 5 is probably the kicker for me. It's honest self-reflection. It is really hard for me to be honest with myself about my own behaviors. That day that I lost control in the supermarket, I have to look at that and I have to understand that there were decisions in that process that I made that were not the fault of my mental illness. Now, that is an extreme situation. A psychotic episode is a whole different story. That's what I was in when I tried to kill myself, a psychotic episode. But even the night that I tried to take my own life, I have to look at the things that I could have controlled. When I realized that things were starting to get to a point where I was feeling trapped and I was not feeling safe, I ignored it. I continued my behavior that I was in at that time, which was just escalating my feelings, making things much, 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 much worse. It's hard to look at your own behavior when so much of that behavior is negative. When you can look at it and you can go, that was not the way that I would have or should have acted in a certain situation. I have to give myself a break. I have to rely on all my other strategies, including the first one, acceptance, that my reality has changed, that my reality is not the same as everybody else around me. And understanding that some things were my fault. So nobody's completely to blame for my mental illness. There are a lot of factors: bad management, long working hours, poor money. Um, but the biggest one was the fact that I was burning out and I was ignoring the signs. As soon as I started blaming my clients for their behavior, why is this guy with acquired brain injury doing this? What the hell is wrong with him? Well, he's got acquired brain injury. Well, you should stop it. Can't help it. It seems ridiculous, but you get mad at the people. You get mad at the client because of their behavior. Why are you like this? Just stop it. I was burning out. I'd had enough. I had taken too many punches and kicks and bites, real bites, not imaginary, metaphorical bites, like being bitten, being punched, being kicked, having microwaves thrown at me. And the hardest part is that I want to blame all these other things. I want to blame bad management. I want to blame the system. I want to blame everybody else but myself. And the day that I turned around and said, okay, there were things that I could have done. Okay. What happened to me was not my fault. I did not deserve to be attacked by a man with a knife. That was not something that I ever signed up for in my career. It was not something that should be acceptable. And given the policies in the house, it should never have happened. The dude with the knife should never have had access to the knife that he had access to. That was supposed to be locked away from him, but they weren't. The staff on shift before me were lazy, tired, confused, forgetful, whatever they were. This client had access to a kitchen knife, and it was a couple of kitchen knives. There are so many things that I want to blame about my injury, but I have to take responsibility for the things that I didn't do. I held myself back from going into management. Didn't want to go into management. I loved shift work. I love working with the clients. I love being a manager. I love being able to be on the coal face, making a difference every day. But I was past it. I was over it. My mind had had enough. My daughter came to me and I echoed something that my mum said. She said the same thing that I said to my mum, which was, um, I want to spend my life caring for people. And my mum, who's a RN midwife, ex-emergency nurse, said to me, I have done enough to serve people so that you don't have to. And I didn't understand that at the time. I thought it was ridiculous. It's like, no, 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 no. It's not like there's this cosmic debt system. But it was interesting the other day when my daughter said, I want to care for people in this way in my career. And I surprised myself by echoing my mum by saying, mate, I spent so much of my life sacrificing my health, my time, my body, um, my essence in serving people with disability that don't give a damn about me now because they can't. They don't remember me. I'm just one in a long line of people that have cared for them. Sure, you have great relationships with some, but for the most part, I'm just an old staff member. Remember that guy that used to work here? Oh, yeah, the dude with the long hair. Yeah, I remember him. Telling my daughter that I didn't want her to go into that field because she didn't have to. She earned the right. I earned the right for her to do a selfish job. And it's funny when you see any other job that's not in the care sector as being selfish because you'll get paid a wage. I made a massive transition after my injury. I had worked for 18 years with people with disabilities, and I went into the public service, or I guess the civil service if you're in the UK and Britain, and I was flabbergasted. I did not understand what, say, time in lieu was. I didn't understand what a sick day was. I didn't understand morning teas. My first day there was a farewell for somebody. They gave me a bunch of work. 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm hooking into that work, getting it done. I am then told, "Oh, we're having a morning tea for this guy." "Oh, I don't know him." "Oh, no, 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 it's a whole office thing. Come and hang out." We spent 2 hours there. An hour and 45 minutes, I was standing there tapping my feet, looking at my watch going, "When are we gonna get back to work? We've got work to do." It was so anathema to me to be at work not doing something that it was making me feel sick. I was without exaggeration, my stomach was in turmoil because we were mucking around at this stupid morning tea, getting paid for it. All of us were getting paid 2 hours. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't fathom it. Lunchtimes. Nobody ever told me that there was something called a lunchtime. I hadn't had a lunchtime since high school. Because when you work with people with disabilities, you're eating lunch with the clients. You're helping them eat. You are constantly at work. You are constantly not going to the bathroom. Just, "Oh, I need to go to the bathroom, so I'll go to the bathroom." It's like, I will finish this task that I'm on, no matter how long it takes, and then I will go to the bathroom. And I have incredible self control when it comes to going to the bathroom that I don't need to have. Even today, I feel at times, like not today, right now, but in the last couple of days, I can remember there's times that I'm sitting there not going to the bathroom for absolutely no reason, even though I'm busting. So I might be helping my daughter with something. It's not going to take me 2 minutes to go to the bathroom, but it's so inculcated in my mind that I'm at work, I'm completing something that all else, including my own body, can wait until the task is finished. This is where honest self-reflection comes in. I have to look at the times that I get angry. Why am I angry? Why am I sad? What has happened? Is there something that's happened? It's hard when you can look at so many things in your life and blame them for the struggles, the suffering that you're going through. To be able to look back on that and go, okay, I have to view it through the lens of my mental illness. I have to understand that I'm going to fail, but what about that failure can I try to fix? What can I alter? What in my behavior is something that I can change? So, my strategies, all 5 of them, in no particular order. First is acceptance. Accepting that you have a mental illness. The second is avoidance, learning what and when you need to avoid things. And equally, when learning when you have to confront things as well and to what level you can. But it comes down to avoidance. The third one is distraction. Taking the times that I can, where I'm able to not be consumed with my mental illness recovery, to be consumed with my pain, my sorrow, Mindfulness is the fourth one. It's reminding myself that I am safe, that my assailant is not going to get me. And then lastly was honest self-reflection. This has not been an easy subject to talk about because I'm talking about things here that are at the core of my being. These are the things that consume me every single day, every single minute of every single day. It's not one of these things, it's 3 or 4 of these things. Sometimes it's all of these things. People wonder why I look tired a lot. Well, firstly, there's lack of sleep. That comes a lot for me. But in my head, it's just this constant marathon, this constant flood of emotions. In Australia at the moment, we're suffering incredible floods, really, really horrible floods. But when I look at the situation, I can see my mental health in those floods. I can see where times are bad, where all my natural barriers are broken down and there's nothing I can do but just try to survive. This is where mental illness understanding meets awareness. When we understand that the person in front of you, with whatever behavior they have because of their mental illness, it's 99.9999% of the time got nothing to do with you. My wife will tell you that. I can tell you that with my own kids that have mental illness. So I'm so ready to assume blame and assign blame to myself that I have to remind myself that no, hang on. What they're going through is not necessarily who they are. What they're demonstrating is not what they're trying to say. Because all communication, all behavior is communication. Everything that you do is a behavior. It's to say something about yourself or to say something to other people, but it's a conscious decision to do things. The only things that aren't behavior is like breathing, blinking, things that you can't control. So when I look at a person with mental illness, I'm wondering, what are they saying with their behavior? What is it that they're trying to say? When I'm feeling things well up inside me, what am I trying to say? What is it that is disturbing me? Is it something that I can alter? Is it something that I can change? Is it something that I can avoid? Or is it something that I just have to accept and try and turn it into white noise? So, for the last time, my 5 strategies: acceptance, avoidance, distraction, mindfulness, and honest self reflection. I'm going to put all this gear up on the Instas and at the 5 points. You can listen to this through the Wisdom app. You can listen to the whole thing. Alternatively, we're on YouTube. It's called Shattered the Podcast. I'm going to end pretty much the conversation right there. Thank you for listening to Shattered the Podcast. I'd like to thank our producer, Meredith Brosnan, our executive producer, Torian Lau, and the band Adelaide for allowing us to use their song as our theme. Go to shatteredthepodcast.com for more information.